Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Pulse 89.9. It's In Topic, and it's Kathryn Gene. Of course, I have Jan, my co-host, with me today. Hello, everybody. Wet. It's been, hasn't it, Jan?
It has. Did you flood where you are?
No, we don't flood. It's just that instead of just looking out to the green, we look out to Lakeview.
That's true, yeah.
You get the best of both worlds when you look at it. Everyone, we've got a guest, or we have two guests in the station with us this morning. As I commonly do, I look on Facebook, as most of us do these days, to see what's going on. And when I was looking on Facebook a few weeks ago, I came across a post that had a development application for a residential address. And the development application, the thing that really sparked my interest is that I've never known a development application for a residential address that needed 19 toilets. Now, I do know that sometimes people have looked at my house and gone 7 bedrooms, but I go 5 kids. What do you expect? But 19 toilets?
Well, there's only 2 of us, and I think we've got 3.
Yeah. 3 kitchens, 3 laundries, and let's chuck in a conference centre,
Yeah,
a bowling alley, and let's have a good movie theatre at the same time. Okay. Now, we have with us in the studio today Janet and Colin, who's going to remain silent pattern. How are you, Janet?
I'm very well, thank you. Then how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And of course, we have Nathan Saprogno. Did I say it right?
Close enough.
Closely. Okay. All right. So I wanted to get that right, Nathan. That's really, I'll have to practice it.
So if you want to be particular, Zamprogno.
Zamprogno. Okay.
But I answered it worse.
Well, I won't call you worse. Nathan, this has obviously got a lot of red flags around it. I know that it's gone through the development application. There's also been, because I've been in contact with Janet regarding this, an independent town planner, Levy Planning, that put in a report as well. What's your views as a councillor on what's going on here at the moment? Because it really puts flags everywhere.
All right then. Okay. So firstly, we've got to set the landscape in the sense that how we could arrive at a position like this.
Yep.
A number of years ago, previous state government, the Liberal National Coalition government, took away a lot of planning powers from elected chambers.
Mm.
And what that meant was that an increasing number of DAs were approved either by staff under a delegated authority,
yep,
or by local planning panels, and the elected chamber were taken out of the loop.
I know that.
When I was first elected to council in 2016, we fielded DAs like this, and we were diligent. We went out and we looked at the site and we spoke to the neighbours, and we had to make a value judgment about whether it was in the community's broader interest. It wasn't merely a box-ticking exercise. 2017 rolls around and the state government, assuming that all councils are corrupt, that was their working premise, largely pricked by a couple of bad eggs in inner west councils that were corrupt, proceeded to take away those decision-making powers from all councils in the Sydney metropolitan area, and here we are. So this DA has never been run through the chamber. We've never been briefed about it. We were never asked what our opinion was, and we now find out that this DA was received, processed and approved by council under its delegated authority in November of last year, and now, because of the diligent efforts of the Pattons and others, we now see that there are some concerns about this particular development. And as you foreshadowed in your introduction, this is a rural residential area. The zoning is RU4. These are largely 5-acre allotments and up. So it's perfectly okay to put a house on there. And sometimes, as we know, somebody with some means comes along and wants to build a bigger house, and there's nothing wrong with that. This, I think, transcends a boundary. If there's a development that has 10 bedrooms, 12 car parking spaces, 17 toilets, 3 laundries, 3 kitchens, a bowling alley, what was labelled in the original lodgement as a convention space, a conference space, and then when council staff raised some concerns and said, you do know that this is not an approvable use in this zone. They didn't change the form of the building. They simply relabelled that room so that it wasn't a conventional.
What's that over it, Nathan?
Formal retreat.
Formal retreat.
The 2 offices contained within that room, and it's bigger than most houses, were his office and her office. They're now yoga room and meditation room.
Right. So I just want to say I do understand the DA approval, the way it is done with an external board. And I've actually gone over that with Les because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community that the council are the ones that make the decision when in actual fact it is this board that sits, and not necessarily, I think you can confirm here, on that board that sits to approve DAs, not necessarily is that board made up of people, residents or businesses in the Hawkesbury area.
Okay, that's correct.
Yeah.
Local planning panels may have people that live in the area, but if they do, it's purely coincidence.
Yeah.
They can be people who have subject matter expertise in some facet of planning, but by and large, they don't live in the area. They have no skin in the game, and they have no democratic accountability in the sense that if they make a decision that people don't like, nobody can vote them out.
Mm.
And I've always said that was a deeply undemocratic move, and I've stood against planning panels ever since, because people still come to me and my fellow councillors expecting that we have some agency on their behalf in making these decisions, and I have to tell them that by and large we don't.
But question here, there has been faults shown in and misrepresentations or mistruths in the actual DA application. I think we have a letter somewhere from Ampol Gas about representation of certain things being made that Ampol knew nothing about, which in my layperson's thinking would make the DA application invalid. If that's the case,
possibly, but I can't offer a legal opinion.
No, I'm not.
I can only offer a layman's opinion. My opinion, for what it's worth, is worth no more than any man in the street. The fact that I'm a councillor doesn't give it any extra weight.
No.
And it's this: there is a major gas easement that travels under that property.
Yep.
Information relevant to that gas easement should have been put to Ampol, who was the outside agency that were asked for comment, and I read all of the reports. They came back and said we didn't have any problem, but I suspect that's because they weren't given all of the information. I can offer an opinion, and it's this: this DA should never have been approved. There were so many red flags about the applicant's intent to operate this 2,575 square metre building, for things other than what are approvable uses under the RU4 zoning. You can't use it as a religious house of worship. You can't use it as a conference or a convention centre. You can't use it as a school. You can't use it as a kind of a bed and breakfast with 10 bedrooms.
Yes.
And there's been, in my opinion, some chicanery about how they've described this that mysteriously have allowed it to slip through. But you've asked the $64 question, and it's this: now that the approval's been given, are there any takesy-backsies? And I have discussed this with the Mayor, and I'm putting questions to council staff about precisely that. If information comes to light that, had it been known, would have resulted in a non-approval, can this be taken back? It may be, and I haven't had this confirmed yet, that approval is approval. Council's mistake stands, which then puts us in the interesting situation of relying on a party to engage in litigation at the Land and Environment Court, or asking for a judicial review, or having a word to the wise, to the applicant, to say there are conditions on this consent that underline that you may not use this grand dwelling for the purposes that we think you are, and if you try, compliance action will follow. and your $10.5 million investment will be wasted because you will not be able to receive paying visitors or run your religious retreats or conferences or conventions or whatever it is that they're seeking to do. And I don't exactly know what that is.
No.
And to prevail upon them that they're being watched and they can't use it for a non-approved use. But putting it in the realm of council's compliance and enforcement staff is a suboptimal solution. We shouldn't have arrived at this place.
So my question, okay, so I'll tell you what comes to my mind immediately. Wilcox property.
The family whose house was going to be demolished in order to build the approach road for the Gruff River Bridge.
Yes.
We know them well.
And I think a lot of people in the Hawkesbury would have known about the Wilcox property and the dilemmas and what went on for Marianne and her family. And to me, and I've actually spoken to Marianne, and she was shocked that this was happening. And she does want to speak to you, Janet. So she has offered her help to you. But the thing is that she went down a really big road, Marianne, to try and do what she needed to do. And in some ways, slightly different this is than what this is presenting as. But she did come through triumphant in the end.
Yes, with some help. It disappointed me that with the Wilcox situation, there were councillors who took a very legalistic approach. And they said, it ticks the boxes. How should we care? You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. And I don't think that's good enough. I think if being an elected representative in that chamber means anything, it means listening to the community, and that sense of collective injustice was felt on their behalf.
Yeah.
That council had made a mistake. And if council makes a mistake, it should be big enough to own that mistake and to say, this should not have been approved, there was a better way through, there was something that could have been compromised. I'm glad that we got where we ended up with the Wilcoxes.
Yeah. It sort of, for me, I look at it and I think, and I know that this is all up in the air, but we're just having a discussion on this. If there's a panel that's given that authority to approve and disapprove DAs, and they have the scope, which is that it's an RU4 zoning, and they've done their job incorrectly, there must be some way of coming back at that. Do you get what I mean?
Yes, and you would wish that that was the case, and I can't speak to that because at the moment I'm at the level of having discussed it personally with the mayor, and I'm asking questions of staff.
Right.
You know, what the avenues for review are, which could involve the uncomfortable recognition that council made a mistake, or, if we were going to be generous, that council made a decision upon a misrepresentation from the applicant. But I can't make that claim.
No.
Either.
No.
Because we've got to do some digging to get to the bottom of whether, you know, merely, as our example earlier showed, merely relabeling a space from a non-approved use to a benign use, when it's clear that once that structure is built and they're behind their closed front door, what enforcement is there that they're using it for an approved use or a non-approved use?
Yeah.
And it's invidious, and we do not want to be in the position where neighbours to inappropriate developments have to become council's enforcers and spies and be monitoring noise levels at their fence line, or the number of cars parked in the driveway, or the hours in which people come and go, and, you know, whether there is an inappropriate use occurring, because council should have been more diligent in its decision-making to save people from precisely that situation.
Yeah.
And I've got to be limited in what I say in order to be fair to staff and fair to the overall situation and fair to the applicant as well. All I know is that there's evidence that I'm convinced of that the applicant intends to build a $10.5 million, 2,500 metre square structure for a use that is not approvable under this state.
Yeah.
Right.
Something I want to say is, when is it going to start being built? Like, have they got a date for that yet?
Separate question. So when an approval by council is given, the clock starts ticking. And generally you get 4 years to commence a development. If 4 years comes and goes and they haven't commenced, it lapses. But it's trivially easy to commence by moving a bucket of gravel from one site to another within that allotment. And then council will say, clearly you have commenced. A good example was the Hindu temple that was approved for construction in Benwick Street in McGrath's Hill. That decision was made in late 2016. 4 years came and went, should have lapsed. Then COVID came along and the state government gave all applicants that were in that suspended animation an extension. And just before this extended deadline in 2021, they dug a small hole and they haven't proceeded with that development since. But because it's commenced, they could take the next 10 or 15 years to build that if they wanted to. And this phenomenon is so prevalent, we have a name for it. They're zombie DAs. And a zombie DA can exist with approval and notional commencement for years and years and years. Times change, rules change. What would have been unacceptable now, because it was acceptable back then, still carries forward that approval that they got. And suddenly you've got developers, knocking down koala habitat when now that wouldn't have been permitted, or building something of a certain scale or for a certain use that wouldn't have been permitted, but they had the approval. So I'm sorry to give you a long-winded answer to a simple question. That's the way things work in planning, and it's taken me 9 years on council to kind of get my head around that.
Yeah. So talking about scale, is there a certain ratio of scale to property size that you're permitted to build on an area?
That is too deep into the weeds of planning law for me to be able to answer confidently.
Okay. Do you know that, Janet?
Sorry?
If the ratio of the building size to the property, is there a regulation there? Do you know if that, did Levy cover that in their report?
I can't remember if she did, but I have seen somewhere within all the paperwork that I have that there is, particularly a build on a boundary, it has to be certain
distances.
Distance, height, and length of the boundary.
Yeah. And how does that
exceeds? It totally exceeds those limitations. So the sealed 3 metres from our boundary fence is over 8 metres in height.
Right.
They're allowed, I think it's 1.5 metres. That they've come up with a solution for that, or a reason, or because it's on a big lot, which it's not, it's allowable.
Well, there'd be, like Nathan's been saying, that whether we agree or disagree with the rules that are put out, there would be limitations and rules of how much.
There may, and there we go, they get DA approval for 5 years. Okay,
Yeah.
good. My concerns began when I could see the inconsistencies between documents, between submissions.
Yes.
Sometimes it's described as a dwelling, sometimes it's described as a commercial development. The bushfire report, which was commissioned by the applicant, says, we're very pleased to provide this report on the commercial development at 201 Pebbly Hill Road Cattai. So it was clear to them the scale or use of the DA that was being submitted, that they were being asked to provide some comment on. This was the applicant's own submission.
Yeah.
The fact that the number of bedrooms quoted varies depending on which page you're looking at. The fact that the number of car parking spaces varies depending on which page you're looking at. The fact that the use that a particular space will go to varied from the first submission, which was withdrawn, to the second submission, that's the one that got the approval, where all they did was rename the space. To me, it seemed fairly transparent that there was
intention,
pea and thimble trick going on here.
Yeah.
And I don't know why our council staff made the decision that they did, and I want to give them the benefit of providing an answer that we can put on the public record and then tell us what the courses are.
Just on the thing about parking, how many car spaces have they?
There
Oh, lots.
are 12 car parking spaces on the plant. It's a 3-story building
Okay.
in a street that is zoned for residential development only, and a small list of permissible uses that you can have under RU4.
Yeah. You just said then, Nathan, and I'm just trying to make sure we have this defined. The DA, just going over it, the DA approvals go out to an external panel, correct?
The local planning panel is convened and met on the 17th of July to cast their eye over this, yes.
So where does the council come into it when you say we want to find out with the council why they let certain things?
So the local planning panel provide a recommendation. Council staff receive the application, they write a report, they go out to all of the external agencies, whether it's fire emergency services, in this case, Amble, because there's a gas easement, get all of those reports back, collate the responses, write up a report, and ultimately council staff provide a recommendation to the planning panel about whether this should be approved or not.
Got it.
And then the planning panel either rubber stamps that or they take a contrary view.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was then approved by council staff under their delegated authority.
Right.
It was not run through the chamber. And these things of this scale are no longer run through the chamber. I would invite your listeners to direct their anger at the previous Liberal National Coalition government. Fact is that the current Labor government have done nothing to wind this back, despite making, noises about how undemocratic this was before they took power 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I look forward to a day where these kinds of planning decisions are restored to local government.
Yeah.
But I may die waiting, because the mood in state governments is that councils stand in the way of development. Councils and their silly NIMBY attitudes and their residents with their concerns, well, we're just going to cut them out of the process as much as we can so that things are declared state significant, things go to that State Housing Development Authority, which is a little staff chamber of, a small committee handpicked by the state government to say yes to as much as they possibly can. And then we end up in anthill Sydney. And that's what I've fought all my political life against.
Yeah. Look, we might go just to a short break. And welcome back to Pulse 89.9. It's Kathryn Gene, and of course, Jan, I've got with me here on In Topic, and we've been talking about the DA application that's going through at the moment that's very questionable as to its, whether it is actually a residential or commercial. And Nathan, I know that there's sort of limitations on what you can say, and I understand and appreciate the fact that you need to speak to council to see what's going on, and you only did actually go meet with the other councils or some of them on Friday, so you haven't had much time to.
That's right. Janet brought this to my attention, last year.
Yeah.
And it's true that on Friday, myself, Councillor Lyons Bucket, Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Ryan and myself went out there to see this on the ground.
Yes.
And, I came away with the feeling that this is a quiet, rural, residential street.
Mm.
And the scale of this was inappropriate.
Mm.
I hasten to add, as I'm sure the General Manager will remind me, that I cannot appear online here with you on your show and purport to represent the view of council. My view is only my own.
I do.
As a councillor, so
yeah.
I've said that. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I want everyone to realise that this is Nathan's opinion. It's not necessarily the council's. When you were out with the other councillors, in your opinion, how did they receive this information?
I think the fact that we, as a group, were out there indicated our sympathy and our sense of shared concern. And the sense that I left with at the end was that we all want to ask more or less the same questions of council staff to say, how did we arrive here? Why was this decision made? Could a mistake have been made? What are the avenues for review moving forward? Our working assumption is that there's no taxi-backsies, in the sense that even in the light of new information, even in the light of clear information that something had been omitted or misrepresented, that, you know, the rules of the system state that once approval is given, that's it. Well, what do you then do if there is new information, or if the chamber has an overriding concern? And we will be asking precisely those questions. And I can't say anything more until we have answers.
No, I understand it. Do you know how long it would take for, say, Janet to get answers on this?
Um,
Only saying this because I know, and I do realise you'd appreciate the stress that they're under.
No, there is a process. And I know that council has an anecdotal reputation for being slow at times, but I've also seen evidence in the last year of council acting remarkably nimbly when their feet are held to the fire. I moved a motion about dual occupancy in June. It came back to the chamber in August, and it's been given gateway approval by the 13th of November. That's remarkably quick for something that everybody seems to agree is a fairly good idea on the dual occupancy front. So, you know, I have the highest of hopes of council's ability to respond in a timely way. And that's the diplomatic way I'm going to phrase that.
Thank you for that diplomatic way.
Your listeners,
You'd be that.
your listeners may take a different view. I couldn't possibly comment.
Yes. Well, do you know, the thing is, there's no way really you can actually say when something's going to happen because there's too many tangibles in this. So that's the way it is. Janet, for you, did you invite Nathan out?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you invite all the other councillors out?
Yes.
Did you invite all of the councillors in the Hawkesbury out?
The ones that I could contact, yes.
Did everyone you contact come out?
No.
Right. Do you want to name who did come out?
No.
No, I don't think you would. Yeah, okay.
Try to be diplomatic.
Okay, you went too close to Nathan. I think you're getting his diplomacy here. Does it disappoint you, Nathan, as a person, in your opinion, that other councils didn't see the faults that are going on? Because what concerns me here is, does this lay precedence for other things to go?
It does disappoint me. It disappoints me that there are councillors who, you know, traditionally have not turned up to briefings, who only turn up to, you know, a minimum number of community events. The only thing for which a councillor can be censured is if they fail to turn up to 3 chamber meetings in a row.
Yeah.
Apart from that, they can take their stipend and claim all of the relevant expenses and not turn up to very much else. And I think that breaches trust that's been invested in them by voters to do a diligent job. Like, you know, I'm not going to name names, but if I whistle a tune, you can usually follow along. And I've made pointed comment about some of my colleagues in the past, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's fine. Now, Jen, I'm just talking and I haven't let you say it. That's sorry. I'm quietly sitting here. That's a good sign. I get very indignant when I see these things. And as I said earlier in the program, it just sort of red flagged and the Wilcox property came up for me. But I mean, we've looked through the information you've given us, Janet, and that Levy planning. Now, you got them on your own expense.
Yes.
Yes, you paid, what, $4,500 for them to do a report.
Yes.
And how many faults did Levy, the independent Levy planning, find?
The whole DA application found fault with every single part of it. And all of her recommendations did not happen.
Right.
They washed every single one.
In the sense that, was there a formal response to the concerns that were raised, or were they completely ignored and didn't seem to be part of the deliberation?
Completely ignored until I think it was the development consent. They went through all the issues that were raised within our submission, our 2 neighbours' submissions, and Levy planning's submissions, and they just whitewashed every single one. As far as commercial build, they concentrated on the existing dwelling only, not the new build.
There's something to add there. So there is an existing dwelling on the property,
Yes.
which the applicant intends to retain
Yes.
and turn into a home office.
Yes.
The concern that council staff had the wit to raise was that there was insufficient evidence that the house would be rendered uninhabitable by the removal of a kitchen, the disconnection of plumbing, the things that would mean that it wasn't a house anymore
Yes.
and would only be an office. And I think there was some half-hearted attempt to kind of address that. But
It's now been changed to outbuilding.
this is a house. It's an existing house with
Yes.
a kitchen, a bathroom, a laundry and all the rest of it. And, I rather suspect that, again, once the final inspection has been ticked and they council staff ride off into the sunset, it's up to near neighbours to then monitor the use or to ask council's enforcement staff to go in and say, hey, is this continuing to be used as a dwelling?
I was going to say, is that not dual occupancy then? Are they allowed dual occupancy?
Well, here's the irony. I've made a name in advocating for dual occupancy, but as it stands, under the current rules, you would not be permitted to have two freestanding dwellings on the same property. But that's precisely what they're intending. They can go through this pantomime of saying, well, we'll decommission the house so that it's no longer habitable as a house. But I myself know any number of families in the Hawkesbury where, and this is a very common situation, there's a fibro house built in the 50s or 60s. And then in the 80s, the family have more means. They build an ugly brick house elsewhere on the property and they render the old fibro home uninhabitable. Council's inspection goes through. They can see that the plumbing's been disconnected, maybe even the electric's been disconnected. Maybe it's only an outbuilding. 5 minutes later, everything gets carefully reconnected. It's restored for use as a dwelling, and people have been using that as an illegal, detached dual occupancy for the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
Now, part of me has no objection to that. It's the kind of weird situation that I want to normalise through reforms to dual occupancy. The point that I'm making is that it's trivially easy to get around this as a condition of consent and to say you wouldn't be allowed to have two freestanding houses on the same, because who knows what happens inside that house afterwards. And there are a dozen examples I can cite to you without breaking a sweat of precisely that happening in years past in the Hawkesbury, where council have never been asked or couldn't prove that the original building was being resurrected for use as a residence.
Yeah.
In fact, I learned a new phrase recently, a shouse. It's a kind of a combination between a shed and a house. So a shed that's been surreptitiously repurposed as a dwelling is shouse.
Yes. Good to know. Good to know. We'll put that in the dictionary.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Back to this issue of what you did by paying your own money out to it. You've also gone through and you've got a petition going.
Yes.
So
We didn't actually start the petition.
right, who started that?
A concerned resident.
Yes.
They started the petition. Initially, it had incorrect information, and I contacted her directly and told her the correct information, and she redid the petition that now has 841 signatures. And for a small area of Cattai, Moralia, that's a lot of signatures.
Yeah.
None of the community want this built.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that your area, Nathan?
I grew up in Oakville and family's still in Oakville. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So I'm just wondering which council's area that's under.
Well, that's a legitimate question, but it has a curious answer. We don't have wards.
No.
Hills have wards, Penrith has wards.
Right.
That's where you break up your council area into sub-regions, and notionally certain councillors represent that ward.
Yeah.
They can concentrate their effort, even though when they're in the chamber, they're obliged to make decisions for the benefit of the whole community. Hawkesbury does not have wards. In fact, in 2016, there was a referendum held on this question. Should the council introduce wards that was comprehensively defeated? So people like having their councillors representing the whole of the Hawkesbury, which makes our job harder. I have to represent the interests of people from Bilpin to St Albans and down here in the southeast where things are more concentrated. But that's just the way it is.
Yeah. So what's your next steps, do you find? You'll be waiting to hear back from Nathan or any other councillors to the, we're going to say the success that they will have. I mean, if you want to have something positive, you've got to project it, haven't you? If you don't project it?
Yes.
Yeah. So
we are thinking of doing a community meeting on it to get people's real views, and so that they can see everything firsthand that we have flagged all the inconsistencies, just everything that's wrong about it. And we have been told that we should get legal advice from a specialist lawyer.
Yeah.
I think it's the land and environment law.
And I think that there's someone that will help you with that, right? I also was given ideas to give you of the possibility of having a current affair involved.
We have thought of that too.
Yes, and I'm sure ABC Radio and 2GB will be interested.
Yes.
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 So
I've thought of that too. We just wanted to see how far we could get without having to pull the big guns.
yeah. Do you know, I know it might sound like big guns, but I look at it as awareness. Like, if I hadn't have been scrolling through that day on Facebook, and I mean, as bad as Facebook can be, it's got some really great things that happen there, or social media in general, you know, I wouldn't have seen it. We wouldn't be sitting here today, which is very sad, all right, because the one thing that community radio is for is to voice the community. And that to me is what the main purpose of community radio is. And, you know, it's not like you've gone out and said, well, I don't want a house built next door to mine. It doesn't suit me. It makes me unhappy. You've actually gone to the point of getting that independent assessment by a town planner, and a house that's 3 stories high. How many metres? 8 metres?
2,000, well, at the height.
Well, because they're still using the land survey that was done before they bought the property, and since buying the property, they did extensive earthwork. The land survey is now null and void, but they would not order another land survey, so we suspect it will go over the 10-metre height, which is the limit.
Oh, right.
And 60 metres down one boundary and 65 across. It's 5 metres from one boundary fence and 3 metres from ours.
That's massive. I can't understand how anybody would want it.
It's difficult to convey this via the medium of radio, but if you go to the council's DA tracker and look up the plans for this, it's a very architecturally daring structure. I'm employing the most polite and euphemistic language that I can. It looks like a Bond villain lair, with all kinds of swoopy and modern architectural shapes, and it's fringed by in terms of the architectural rendering by this semicircle of mature palm trees, certainly aren't on the site at the moment, that make it look like a Taj Mahal. Yeah.
And it's very much into the native of having a palm tree, isn't it, in the Hawkesbury? Why don't we do that? And that's something. What about the Environmental Court? Because I look at this and I know that there's a lot of limitations. Maybe I could be wrong in Hawkesbury, and I'm not asking for legal things here, of literally how much land you do use with concrete and with buildings and such, because of what it does fall out onto the environment and the waterways and the amount of guttering and water that will produce from that roof that then has to flow off. And
I'm not I'm not a lawyer, planner. I'm merely a councillor. My understanding is that when appeals are taken or litigation is taken to the Land and Environment Court, often that's limited to an assessment of whether the rules were followed.
Yeah.
It's not a new de novo merit-based assessment of the whole DA.
No.
And you have to be very particular about the grounds upon which you bring
It's
to the Land and Environment Court. Beyond that, again, I'll await further advice from our council staff about, whether that's an appeal that council could pursue, which would be serious because, council were responsible for approving this. So for council to then support an action to try and overturn it, very unlikely, I think.
unless the information that council received was incorrect
That's
or misrepresented.
that's the unknown question. If something was omitted or misrepresented,
Yes.
and it wasn't merely a mistake or an oversight,
Yeah.
but something was withheld or misrepresented,
Yes.
again, this is very speculative, and I want to be careful about what I say.
Of course. But it shows that it wasn't the council that made the incorrect. They only could make a decision on the facts that were presented to them.
Yes, but I'm also aware that your listeners would throw up their hands at this point and to say, stop buck passing, just fix it. This is further evidence, if more were needed, that the entire sector is broken. Planning in New South Wales is broken, councils are broken, and what you're asking for more money, that's the vibe. That was the vibe of 2025. You're not acquitting the money that we're giving you now. Now you're asking for more. And by the way, your planning processes are.
Yeah. And talking about money, I mean, this it's, now who owns this property is not shy of money, but I'm not going to say I'm on air. It probably go past the legal limitation. So,
and I think that's an important distinction. I don't know who owns this property, read something on a piece of paper, but who they are, what their means are, where they're from, is utterly irrelevant.
yeah,
Worth,
the actual fact.
it's worth making that point. Not as though we're objecting on some kind of inappropriate basis against this. It's that, as far as I've seen, the evidence that's come before me means that this is not an approvable use. End of story.
Yeah.
Well, questions have to be asked.
Yeah.
I don't know Pebbly Hill Road at all. I don't know Cattai very well at all. But my husband and I went through this when we lived up at Wimberley many, many years ago. There was a property being built up there as well. And the whole thing that stopped it was traffic. If this is a commercial building, the traffic is going to be horrendous. That's why I asked about how many car spaces they're putting in, because it's going to cause a lot of problems with traffic and things like that as well. So that's another thing that you need to think about being next door.
No, in the 30 years that we've been there, we have seen an increase in traffic on that road already. If this build happens, it's going to
Be a night.
at least.
Yeah, well, be a nightmare.
And as far as the horseshoe driveway that they're proposing so that vehicles can drive in and drive out the fire truck can't get in and out. The water truck will have to reverse in to be able to drive out.
Yeah, that's not good.
No. But for just firefighting purpose, a house burned down on Cattai Road yesterday.
Yeah.
The RFS had to have 3 tankers down on the lagoon to be able to have enough water for that house. Yeah. The bushfire report is saying that they will not need to access the back of the property for the dam because one report says 25,000 litre, one says 40,000 litre, another one says 100,000 litre tank that is in the basement of this build. The RFS can't, house fire, cannot access that.
Right. Well, I want to thank everyone who's been here today and discussed this. Thanks, Nathan, for coming in and, clarifying and letting us know what's going on as far as council goes.
Always a pleasure, Kathryn.
And most definitely want to keep onto this. And, if you could let me know when you have updates, I would appreciate it. And same with you too, Janet. I think that we'll have a look at this and see what other means and where we can go with this as far as what our job as community radio is.
Oh, no, I just want to thank you so much for taking it up for us.
No,
It means the world.
as I said, the station is for the community. That's what it's for. Okay, then we're done. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks again to Pulse 89.9. It's Kathryn and Jan. And we'll be back next Monday on In Topic. And who knows, we may be even still talking about this.